It is now 7 PM, and I'm reconvening to open session and calling to order the regular Board of Education meeting for Indian Prairie School District 204 on Monday, January 10th, 2022. Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Grover, Ms. Donahue,
Here.
Ms. Jane,
Here.
Ms. Fosdick,
Here.
Mr. Karubis,
Here.
Mr. Rising,
Here.
Ms. Deming.
Present.
We have a quorum. Ms. Jane, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so today we have a public hearing that has to start at 7:05. So we're going to take things a little out of order to kill a couple minutes to get to 7:05. And I believe we have one board salute from Ms. Fosdick.
District 204 students named All-State Musicians. The board salutes 49 District 204 high school students who were named All-State Musicians by the Illinois Music Education Association. These student musicians will perform in the All-State Festival at the end of this month. To earn this designation, students participated in an extremely competitive regional audition process and festival that was held in November. Indian Prairie consistently ranks as a district with the highest number of students selected for all-state participation. This year, District 204 will have students performing in the all-state choir, orchestra, band, and jazz band. Congratulations to these students and their teachers on this stellar accomplishment.
All right, we're going to wait for 3 minutes for the public meeting to start. It's a weird Illinois rule.
Can we waive any other school code rules? That'd be great. Get that question out.
Any more board salutes?
Maybe we can have our own section of the school code just for us, like other districts.
2 minutes always seems like a very long time when you're sitting here waiting. It's kind of like in swimming when 10 seconds is like a huge amount of time.
What? Oh, yeah, I don't know how to put it up.
Should be which one?
It's strapped in.
It is the driver's? Oh,
Yep.
okay. What do we got?
I will say our next Board of Education meeting is January 24th.
Okay.
Okay. It's now time for the public hearing, the application for the waiver modification of the mandates of school code, section 18-8.05 through section 27-24.2 driver's education, presented by Doug Icarius.
Good evening, Dr. Talley and Board of Education members. I'm here this evening for a driver's education fee increase request. The state fully understands that there are many additional costs that come with offering the driver's education program, especially offering behind the wheel component of driver's education. And because of this, it does allow for districts to increase the fees, but if you want to increase the fees beyond $250 for that cost, you have to do a public hearing, and it has certain requirements that go along with that. That wasn't always the case, but we did do our first hearing on this, from what I can tell, back in 2015. So the purpose of the hearing is to present a recommendation to apply to the Illinois State Board of Education to increase fees for driver education beyond the limit set in school code. This actually goes to our legislators who vote on this. Allow feedback from the public and provide rationale for the recommendation. Allow feedback from the Board of Education. There are certain requirements that you have to do in order to request this. You have to post it on your district webpage, which we did. You have to notify the local newspapers and have it published in the local newspaper, which we did. You have to send notification letters to state legislators, and you need to inform your associations in your school district, which we did. As I said, it allows you to charge up to $250. If you do not hold this hearing and you do not request a hearing, you cannot charge more than $250 for this program. So you have to do that, be able to charge more than that. Indian Prairie School District has been charging with approved waivers. Actually, it was 2010 when we went from $200 to $350, and it has stayed at $350 since 2010. Even though our costs have increased by more than 33% during that period of time, in which I'll show you some of the finances related to that. Currently, we bring in $196,350. 203 actually just did their waiver. They've been doing $400 for quite some time, and they're bringing in more even though they have quite a bit less students than we do. Their revenue is actually quite a bit higher because of that. We're bringing $196,000. We get a grant from the state for $140,000. Our total expenses is $1.4 million, and so we see a deficit there of over $1 million. That includes salaries, benefits, repair and maintenance, supplies, license plate renewal fees, insurance, and fuel. All goes into those costs. Just for comparing the other districts that we typically compare ourselves to, as well as some private comparisons for what it costs students to go through the driver's education program. It is important to know that out of the 8 districts you see there, we do have the lowest operating costs. It also doesn't tell the whole story, as different districts have different one of the districts up there that charges a similar amount that we currently do also has regular school registration fees of over $400 compared to ours of $195. So all of them are a little bit different. They also all have different operational costs, but wanted you to have a comparison. Some people do go the private route for all different reasons. Sometimes it's timing for when their child can get their license. And some of it's convenience, or some of it's not wanting to take it, at school, but there's all different reasons for people choosing that. What the actual waiver is requesting, and what you'll see in the waiver that was included in board docs, is that we will charge a fee not to exceed $425. That does not mean that we have to charge $425. But we cannot exceed $425 is what we're asking for the next 5 years. We are making a recommendation to gradually increase that, so it's not done in one fell swoop, by increasing it by $25 next year, $25 the following year. and then $25 more, and then keep it the same for the final 2 years, not to exceed $425. At any point in time, the board can direct us to keep it the same or not increase it. We can do that on a regular, would never be able to increase it more than $425 through the next 5 years. And with that, I'd be glad, I'm not sure if you want questions now or actually
I
during the
think-
action item.
So we'll move to close the public hearing. So I need a motion and a second.
I make a motion to close the public hearing, the application for waiver modification amendments to school code section 18.8.05, section 2724-2, driver education as presented.
Is there a second?
Second, Natasha.
Okay. Any discussion?
Mr. Curious, can you speak to who qualifies for the waiver of these fees?
Sure. Free and reduced lunch students who qualify for that can qualify for all fees to be waived or a portion of fees to be waived. You do have the ability to do that when it's related to driver's education as well.
Great, thank you.
Any other discussion? Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Ms. Grover,
Yes.
Mr. Karubis,
As a point of clarification, we are voting to
Close
close
the session, yeah, the public hearing.
the
Yes.
public hearing.
Yes.
We vote later.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes,
Yes.
it's always confusing.
It-
Ms. Deming. Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Good job.
Ms. Fosdick,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
Ms. Jane.
Yes.
Okay, the motion to close the public hearing passes. Our next item is the student representative report by Lisa Nadtucci from Neuqua Valley High School.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Nathochi. I'm Neuqua Valley School Board Representative, and it is my pleasure to represent Neuqua for you all here tonight. The Student Council is preparing for Mr. NVHS, a male beauty pageant where seniors can show off their talents and fashion sense. Applications close soon, but with the show occurring in February, we can't wait to see our newest Mr. NVHS crowned. See you there. As we finish off our first semester and many students' first set of in-person finals, it is so exciting to see students finish strong. Over the next few weeks, 8th graders, freshmen, sophomores, and juniors will choose their courses for the next school year. With so many courses and paths to success, I'm sure every Wildcat has a great school year ahead. As we approach February, the toiletry drive is beginning to kick into gear. Beginning January 25th, we will be collecting new and full-sized personal items, such as toothpaste, laundry detergent, baby wipes, and even more. It's so great to see Wildcats getting involved with their communities, and we hope that everyone will show their support for this great cause. Recently, 28 Neuqua musicians were chosen by the Illinois Music Educators Association to participate in the ILMEA All-State Conference. Congratulations to all of you Wildcats, and we can't wait to hear how it goes. In other news, the PTSA will be holding their annual Mother-Son Brunch, and tickets are on sale now. Grab this opportunity to spend time with your loved ones. Neuqua's Girls Who Code Club held their annual Hour of Code event, which was open to anyone. Drawing more than 50 people and raffling out prizes, it was incredible to see so many Neuqua students involved in STEM. Finally, it's been a busy few weeks for the Neuqua Athletics. 2 Neuqua Valley football players signed national letters of intent. Congratulations to Palmer Domschke and Andre Cobb. Additionally, other sports are beginning, such as ultimate frisbee, boys and girls basketball, wrestling, and more. We are so proud of you, Wildcats. It's been a pleasure speaking to you all tonight. Thank you for listening. Stay safe and healthy. Have a great night. And as always, go Wildcats.
It is now time for public comment. 60 minutes is allowed for public comment, and each person is limited to 3 minutes. When addressing the board, we ask that you respect the confidentiality and safety of our students and school district personnel. We also ask that those addressing the board be cognizant that this is an open meeting and is available to all age groups, and as such, ask that you consider who the audience members are this evening and keep your comments age appropriate. Public comment represents the voice and opinion of the speaker. There will be no feedback from the board members during the meeting, but follow-up may be provided by an administrator as appropriate. We have 25 people signed up today, so 60 minutes, 3 minutes apiece is 20 people, but if you speak quicker, we might be able to squeeze in a few more. So I will call the name of the speaker and who's going to be after the speaker so that you can come up right away. And we will be cut off at 3 minutes. So with that, the first speaker is Sachin Sharma, be followed by Sid Sharad.
Dear board members and district administration, my name is Sachin Sharma, and I'm a parent and resident of Ponds at Ashford Park South. Thank you for your continued effort to streamline our school boundaries. It's not an easy process. However, what's even more difficult is to understand the sudden, unexpected change for Ponds in a process which had till date been transparent and objective. Ponds is a close-knit community of 26 homes. The current school assignment for Ponds is Kendall Crone Nequa, done as recently as 2018. Several of us built houses and moved here in the last 3 to 4 years, looking for stability and continuity, not expecting another school rezoning so soon. So why reassign us again for another round of disruption and mental stress for our kids? Especially as Ponds is the only subdivision in the district being transitioned from Nequa to Waubonsee. Please remind me, how are we different from our neighbors Ashwood Creek, who go to the same schools as ours? If minimizing disruption is one of your key objectives, this change definitely does not meet that. Distance, it's another significant concern. Ponds and Ashwood Park are the farthest from Waubonsee, more than twice the distance than Nequa. This is an extra 60 to 70 minutes of commute time per day due to longer distance, single lane traffic, train line, and expected construction on 248th Street. Your latest update about 2 hours ago makes it even worse, sending us to a distant Scullin while Crone is in our backyard. You talk about equitable student experience. How is such an extended commute time equitable when our children can go to schools so much closer to us? And finally, through the 8 months of the boundary committee process, none of the concepts proposed anything different than Nequa for Ponds or Ashwood Park. There was no mention about equalizing high school capacity in the criteria or the recommendation or any of the meetings. We accepted concepts 1 or 3 since there was minimal disruption, yet ensured a homogeneous neighborhood with the rest of Ashwood Park. Both these concepts resolve the issue of commute while maintaining optimum feeders. Is it really equitable and fair to introduce such an impactful change at the last minute, catching a small community like ours by surprise? Dear members, this is not about a school choice. It's about fairness and transparency of a process, and about an equitable experience for our children, for their time management, sustainable friendships, and mental well-being. I strongly implore the board to do the right thing, to reject the administration proposal, and to retain the current assignment of schools for Ponds, or choose from the earlier concepts 1 or 3 for Ashwood Park. Please, hear our voice as you've heard others. Thank you.
Next speaker is Sid Sharad, followed by Neha Chakshi.
Dear board members and the administration team, my name is Sid Sharad, and I'm a resident of the Ponds at Ashford Park South. Let me start by first thanking you for the effort to embark upon this daunting change to define school boundaries. I hope that our input here will help you in the decision-making process. We are a small subdivision that has 26 family homes, and 13 families currently reside in our community. All 13 families have unanimously opposed the administration's proposal, and a petition to that effect was shared with you in December. I'll be honest, we've reviewed your current proposal that was provided today, and we feel that our voices are not being heard. Our current school assignments are Kendall, Crone, and Nequa. Ponds went through rezoning only 3 years back, when we were assigned to Nequa. We were therefore supportive of the concepts 1 and 3 that did not make any changes to our middle and high school assignments. Your latest proposal deviates from all proposals discussed to date and rezones us to Waubonsee, second change in 3 years. This change puts our children at a unique disadvantage, unlike any other subdivision. 6 kids from our subdivision currently attend Kendall, and they will lose all their peer relationships as they're pulled away to Scullin and Waubonsee, while the rest of Kendall goes to Crone and Nequa. As if this was not enough, commute to Waubonsee is another challenge. The commute times will double, wasting an extra 60 to 75 minutes of time that takes away from participation in after-school activities. It is laughable that Crone is walking distance from our homes, and yet we are being assigned to Scullin, that is 2 miles away. Creating an equitable experience for our children and minimizing disruption were 2 key guiding principles when you undertook this change. Please explain to me how this is managing disruption or creating an equitable experience for our children. It is disappointing to see that the administration's proposal and the latest version blatantly ignore both in this rush to arrive at a solution. Keeping this in mind, we strongly recommend that the board retains our current school assignments or reverts back to options 1 or 3. I humbly urge the board members to look beyond the numbers and assess the drastic impact this change can create for our children, and cast your vote considering what all this is ultimately about: better educational experience and emotional well-being for our children. Thank you.
Next speaker is Neha Chokshi, followed by Laura Bodenkov.
Hi, my name is Neha. I am a parent of an 8th grader and a junior, and I just want to share, well, first I want to thank you guys for all the work that you've put into all of this. I know it's a long process, and we appreciate you guys hearing us and answering our messages and, just kind of being there and hearing us. What I wanted to kind of explain to you guys, I don't know that anybody can really understand it until your kid is in this position, but I've seen my current junior go through. We got to high school, and one being split, but the split feeders, I understand it's better now, I guess, but the 45-minute bus ride, 30-minute drive now that he drives to school, not being able to participate in everything because we have to pick him up and drop him off, and it's not close. It's not down the street. Nequa's like 5 minutes away, and it takes me 20 minutes to get there with no traffic. So I have to drop him off and then come home, and then I have to go back 2 hours later to go pick him up from a sport. That is not feasible for every parent. It's not an equitable experience for our kids to not have the ability to do these things when there are schools that are closer to us. I can literally see Crone from my front door, and we don't go there. Nequa is down the street. Our kids can ride our bikes there. There are bike paths that go directly there if they needed to. It doesn't make sense that my kid has to wake up so early, get on a bus at 6:23 to get to school when it wouldn't take that long. And most other kids in the district don't have to have that kind of a commute, and that's not really fair that we have to have those kind of disadvantages. I understand it's a really hard process. I understand you guys are trying to balance 1,000,001 things, and I can't even begin to fully understand what you guys are trying to balance. But RSP was in here. I watched every single boundary meeting. I came to every single committee thing that was open for me to come to. We were on board with what they did. They came up with those decisions and all of the options that they came up with for our neighborhood because they made sense. I really, really urge you guys to reconsider either option 1 or option 3. What they came up with really did make sense for our community, and I really, really hope that you guys can understand that. Thank you.
Next speaker is Laura Bodenkov, followed by Doug Schaefer.
Hi. I want to thank the board, the administration, the Boundary Committee, and RSP for the countless hours that have been spent working toward equitable school boundaries for our children. My name is Laura Baldenker, and I am an Ashwood Park resident. My children attend 4th and 8th grades in this district. We moved to Naperville for the schools, and I'm very happy with the education that they're receiving. We have fantastic schools, fantastic teachers, and faculty. I appreciate that modifications have been presented to us today, and that everyone's continued to look at solutions for the challenges that have been here. The concepts or the recommendation continues to provide broken feeders for our neighborhood. Concepts 1 and 3 had addressed those far better for us. The broken feeders were completely taken care of in those concepts. With the 248th widening project, the commute to Wabunsee is going to become a larger challenge than it already is for our children. It's currently taking the high schoolers at least 45 minutes on the bus just to get to school. And that's a terrible commute for new drivers. I ask that you reconsider concepts 1 and 3 as opposed to the administration's recommendation. Thank you.
Next speaker is Doug Schaefer, followed by Alicia Klinko.
Good evening. My name is Doug Schaefer. As a parent of 2 young children in the Ashwood Park community, I am deeply concerned over the 11th hour decision to stray from concepts 1 and 3 and the singling out of Ashwood Park. These same concerns are also noted by over 500 plus Ashwood Park signatures in a recent petition that was circulated and provided to the administration. There was an outside company hired, RSP, which is a professional educating and planning firm with over 20 years of planning experience and 80 years of education experience. This was presented at the meetings due to their expertise, the fact that they are professionals in the business, and use data and facts for decision-making and not emotions. Both concepts 1 and 3, both had Ashwood Park going to Peterson, Crone, and Neuqua Valley High School. This made sense based on all the data and facts. They looked at growth, housing, ethnicity, transportation, proximity to building, special programming, and future projections, all things that need to be considered and vetted. I was relieved that the neighborhood would finally have the correct boundaries that should have been from the very beginning. We agreed with the concepts and therefore did not protest any of those recommendations. Then, at the 11th hour, there was a recommendation to move us to Wabunsee versus Neuqua, and said this was a hybrid concept from concepts 1 and 3. How is this a hybrid concept when both concepts 1 and 3 had us going to Neuqua? It looks like other subdivisions complained, and now Ashwood Park residents must pay that price. That's why data is so important in decision-making and not emotions. Both 1 and 3 concepts address those concerns without regard to politics, emotion, favoritism, you name it, but focused on the data. They got it right. The other issue is of distance to and from Wabunsee and Neuqua to Ashwood Park. While more than double the actual distance is bad enough, the actual time it takes to go from Ashwood Park to Wabunsee is significantly more than double. Has anyone from the administration made this trip to and from Wabunsee from Ashwood Park? In the morning, in the late afternoon, when we're dropping and picking up our children, it is not a pretty scene there. In addition, we'll be asking our first-time high school students, 9th graders, to wake up at a 5:30 a.m. and earlier hour to be at bus stops at 5:25.
Ms. Donahue, speaker's time has ended.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Alicia Pinto is next, followed by Naveen Jagaro Laranhundi.
Dear board members, I want to thank you all for your efforts so far in this process and acknowledging that this is a challenging process with lots of moving targets. My name is Alicia Klinko, and I'm a proud mother of 3 young children and a resident of the Ashwood Park subdivision. My oldest son is in 1st grade, my middle son is in kindergarten, and my daughter has yet to start school. Therefore, my comments are from the viewpoint of more long-range planning, given the ages of my children, and considering the longevity of the boundary adjustments. We moved to Naperville 6 years ago, and I had envisioned my family establishing roots in Naperville, my children growing up with friends, making friends through the middle school and high school years, and having the high school experience that with lifelong friends that my husband and I both had growing up. Just my overall concern with the administration recommendation proposal that was introduced just today, without time for the community to completely analyze and weigh in, is that it still leaves Ashwood Park students with broken feeders from elementary to middle school and from middle school to high school. One of the boundary criteria outlined at the start of this process back in April was to focus on the feeder system considerations and ensure as many schools have students move from one grade level to maximize student connectivity with peers. One of the boundary committee guiding principles is to ensure an equitable student experience at each school. I was cautiously optimistic when this boundary process launched in April. In the very first survey you sent out in the spring, I provided my feedback that I hoped you could fix some of the broken feeders, as Ashwood Park students currently have to split from their peers at both the elementary to middle and then again at the middle to high school levels. This was one of the stated criteria the process set out to fix. And here we are now with a proposal 8 months later that doesn't improve anything for us and actually leaves us worse off. Currently, our elementary school to middle school split is 79% of Peterson going, along with Ashwood Park students, to Scullin. In the proposal today, it proposes 32% of students at Peterson moving to Scullin. Then it splits us again at middle school going into high school. Of the schools in South Naperville, Clough, Springbrook, Patterson, Graham, Bilta, and Kendall all have complete feeders from elementary school all the way through high school. But you're proposing that Ashwood Park students attending Peterson split at both the middle school and high school levels. I do not understand how this creates an equitable experience for our kids as compared to the other peers. I'm also extremely frustrated that this administration proposal is held out as being in a hybrid of the 2 boundary concepts. Both concepts, 1 and 3, had us proposed to attend Peterson, Crone, and Nequa. How is having us move to Scullin Wabanzi a hybrid of those 2?
Ms. Donahue, speaker's time has ended.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Laranhundi, followed by Samaran Mehta.
Hello, this is Naveen Jagalamudi, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. And I'll make it short and simple. All this rezoning process, I think it started because of the Metea Valley is getting overcrowded, and Waubonsee Valley is close to 100%, and the Nequa Valley is undercrowded. And the administration hired a private firm to go over all this process for rezoning with all their experience. They gave like 3 concepts, 1, 2, and 3, and finally it came down to like concepts 1 and 3, which my community is getting affected because you guys consider like a hybrid concept, which is based on 1 and 3 concepts, but in 1 and 3 concepts, both the middle school and the high school are in are the same, like in Nequa Valley. And towards the hybrid, when you guys finalize the hybrid concept,
I don't know what happened, but it all of a sudden, on the 11th hour, it moved to Obansi Valley. But we need, all this is, the reason you guys hired this private firm is because they do like a fair, unbiased, and they give us, and they give you guys what they think without any bias. It's good to hear the public opinion, but they give the fair information based on the data-driven and only scientific data-driven, which they propose concepts 1 and 3. But and I want to know the reason why that was dropped at the last minute. So that's all. Thank you.
Next speaker is Simran Mehta, followed by Kunal Patel.
Good evening. My name is Simran Mehta. I'm currently a senior at Obansi Valley. For elementary school, I went to Peterson, and then for middle school, I went to Scullin, and now I go to Obansi. Starting at Scullin from Peterson, my friend group was instantly divided. But then when I went to Obansi, it was divided even further. All my closest friends ended up going to Nequa, and at that point, I understood that it was not going to be as easy to make new friends, because your friend group is formed right in elementary school and then a little more in middle school. But once you're in high school, it's not that simple because everyone has their groups determined already. My best friend, they don't even live near us. They went to school in Aurora. And I don't know many people that came from this area that go to Obansi, besides the people in Ashford Park. Going to Obansi it's been an adventure. High school is good. But going to a school that far away has imposed some difficulties. Driving there is like 30 minutes. I have to wake up at 5:30, 5 o'clock if I want to catch the bus. And as a 17-year-old, I'm tired as it is all the time. I took a nap before I came here anyways. I don't have the most energy. And so waking up at 5:30 every day or 5 a.m., that's not the most enjoyable thing for me. And if I miss the bus, it's going to be hard for me to drive there because it's 30 minutes away. It's not going to be easy to get a spot right away. Earlier in my high school career, I couldn't join all the clubs or sports I wanted to because it was a difficulty for my parents to be able to drop me and pick me up from school. I also have a heart condition, and so we wanted me to go to a school that was closer in case of a medical emergency. But when I had those events happen at Obansi, my mom it took her like an hour to get there. She left right away, but the distance made it so hard. Another difficulty with driving is as a new driver, the roads are, they're super scary to say the least. I've been driving for about a year, but I also have to cross a railroad track every day on a busy road and a 6-way intersection. And with the crazy Illinois weather that we have, it's icy everywhere. I've seen so many accidents firsthand in that intersection and right outside the school doors. I don't think that we should be risking all of this because of distance. I feel like Nequa is much closer. It would be more convenient for students and for keeping social relationships. I also think for students that are not as outgoing and that have social anxiety or they're introverted, the difficulty with making friendships would increase them, but impact them so negatively. Children in high school have a higher chance of depression, and having a lack of friends, that will just make that so much worse. I understand there's no perfect solution, but I'd highly recommend switching it to Nequa.
Ms. Donahue's speaker's time has ended.
Kunal Patel is next, followed by PJ Alper.
Yeah, I'm speaking I'm number 25, but I'm replacing Nag Jaiswal.
Yeah.
So,
Nag, are you Nag?
Nag Jaiswal, yes.
Okay.
Good evening, board members. My name is Nag Jaiswal. I am a long-term resident of Naperville. I'm a public activist. I have been in election, fellow board members, So I have raised 3 kids. My kids are all graduated, they're out. I had kids in Obansi, Metia, and Nequa. I am here to represent my community to make things that went wrong in 2006. I don't represent, nor the people here represent a builder community, right? The builders built, they moved out. What we are struggling is the mistakes they did. They didn't come in force to correct the mistakes that happened in 2008. 2006, all of these communities were part of the NEQA. Then 2008, there's a history. There's a history where Metea was new, it had less kids, so there was distribution done. But let's correct it now. We can't continue what happened in 2008 in 2022 when the data is showing that we can't drive 45 minutes. My third kid went to Wabansi. A lot of social issues. The commute, the school system was broken, right? So we can't have this. So we have a chance. We have a outside third-party consulting company recommending 1 and 3. So Pulte is building this large community in Bolingbrook. They go to NEQA. They don't belong to Naperville. They go to NEQA. We don't have the funds. We're all settled. Ponds used to go to NEQA. Now they go to Wabansi. Their homes are built. That shouldn't be the case. So there is no transparency. The data is missing. I'm not accusing here. What I'm saying is when the builders build, they have promises. People move in. But it should be scientific. Our NEQA is 10 minutes from my home. Why do I have to send my kid 45 minutes? Everyone's going to ask the same question. So look at the data, take the recommendation. I would recommend number 1. 1 was a very good choice. That was recommended. So please look at it from people point of view. There are 680 homes in this community. We represent 2% of Naperville. We are going to go and vote again. And this is not a happy situation for all of us. So I request all the board members to think that 2% of Naperville is going to struggle because of this decision. Thank you.
Okay, Alper, Ms. Alper, followed by Shyam Parameswaran.
Hi, board and the administration. My name is PJ Elper, and I'm a parent of 2 small children, ages 3 and 7, residing in the Ashwood Park community. Thank you today for listening to our concerns and responding to my many emails the last few days. I would like to voice my concerns again on the new administration concept that was posted today and from December 20th board meeting. I would like to ask the board to reject and vote no to the administration concept being presented. The new administration concept has not been vetted, gone through the normal process and protocols that were set place by this board. There has been no public forum to go through the concepts. There has been no transparency, and it has been a last-minute decision where you have caused concerns and stress to the Ashwood Park community. This last-minute proposal is unacceptable. The administration concept is based on their agenda with no community input. One of my concerns is the new proposed admin concept being presented today is that the proposal put the children at Ashwood Park in a worse position than we are currently today. Today, 78% of our kids are going from Peterson to Scullin. The new concept being proposed has only 32% going to Scullin. That is not an equitable experience. What was the purpose of volunteers joining a boundary committee, hiring RSP, and months of public discussion where nothing has been accomplished or fixed for Ashwood Park? So I am asking, is there a political or personal agenda that needs to be communicated to the community? I am having a very hard time understanding the proposal and how it solves any issues that we are currently faced with Ashwood Park. I am pleading, begging, asking the board to please reject and vote no to the administration concept that is being proposed today. It was posted less than 2 hours ago with no time for the community to be vetted and understand the full consequences of this new proposal. Please consider concept 1 or 3 that the board, that the boundary committee unanimously voted for. No broken feeders. Broken feeders will cause emotional, mental, and social issues for our children. I ask again for the board to put yourself in the shoes of Ashwood Park parents. If you are a parent, would you want your children to attend a school with a broken feeder? Would you want your children to go through friends being separated at the middle school and high school level? Again, please consider option 1 or option 3 for the boundary committee has proposed and that RSP has
Ms. Donahue,
supported.
speaker's time has
Thank
ended.
you.
Speaker is Cheyenne Parameswaran, followed by Joe George.
Respected Madam Chair, members, and Dr. Talley. My name is Shyam Parameswaran, and I live in Ashwood Park. My wife and I, years ago, decided to settle in Chicagoland. We chose Naperville because of its excellent school system. And we decided to get our roots deeper in this community because of the outstanding work each one of you do. So I really thank you for your great work. Having said that, I have some serious reservations on the boundary process. As many of us said already, we had a 8-9 month long journey. We engaged an expert external third party, neutral third party who's supposed to be an expert in this field. We went through these proposals ad nauseum and we landed on options, concepts 1 and 3. And then suddenly, right before the holidays, there was an administration proposal. We didn't get much time to react. Again today, 2 hours before this meeting, there is a new revised proposal. So we are not getting enough time to analyze or go through the details. And I would tell you that this is not a transparent process. I have some questions, and I'm going to strictly stand in the confines of the boundary criteria that you set aside when we started this journey. Criteria number 1, we wanted to create boundaries that visually make sense. If Ashwood Park is assigned to Waubonsee, it would be the farthest southwest subdivision to go there, which is more than twice the distance to Nequa. It is also worth noting that in today's revised proposal, there are some communities that are equidistant to both schools being directed to Nequa. How is that fair? Is it meeting the criteria? Criteria number 10 was about transportation and the time kids are spending on the bus. By sending Ashwood Park kids to Waubonsee, you're more than doubling their commute time. There are many kids in this room who get up at 5 o'clock and catch a bus at 6:25. And remember, they have to do it for 4 years straight. And I request you, make that trip one time. Come there at 6:30 and try to get through there. It is a single lane traffic. As a bonus, we have a rail cross. And on top of that, we have the 248 construction that is about to happen right now. Criteria number 4 was to fix the broken feeders. Many of us already mentioned that. Concepts 1 and 3 carefully addressed that, and now we are throwing it out in the water. Criteria number 7, under this criteria, we wanted to keep our neighborhoods intact. This revised proposal, would split us from other communities that we share our clubhouse and other amenities with. So again, how are we keeping our promise here? Finally, one of our key guiding principles was to ensure an equitable student experience. As my daughter gets up at 5:30 in the morning to get ready to go to school, high school that is more than 2 times farther away, and while subdivisions that are much closer to Waubonsee are going to Nequa, how would I convince her that this process is equitable and we are really taking care of her educational and social emotional needs? I humbly request you to select either concept 1 or concept 3. Thank you very much for your time.
George, followed by Sabra Mishra.
Dear members of the board, Dr. Talley, and fellow 204 families, my name is Joe George, and I live in the ponds of Ashwood Park South. Thank you for this opportunity to voice my concerns on the boundary proposal. I have written to you personally voicing my concerns and wish to reiterate and reinforce them. I have 3 children currently in the school system: a 6th grader at Crone Middle School, a 5th and a 3rd grader attending Kendall Elementary School, and our youngest is set to begin kindergarten this upcoming fall. While appreciating the effort that all of you and others have made during this process, which we believe to be quite comprehensive and transparent, that is, until on December 20th, 2021, and then again today, as the administration proposals lead us to believe otherwise. We, the families of the ponds, are unanimously and unequivocally against the administration proposals. We feel that our kids have been neglected and not considered in this plan. We were changed from the rest of Ashwood Park in 2018. Our children had struggled to adjust to the new schools and make new friends. Superintendent Talley's statement on the 20th that the administration's recommendation was a blend of concepts 1 and 3 are inaccurate, especially in the case of the ponds of Ashwood Park South, because neither of those concepts had our community in the schools that the administration is now recommending. Concepts 1 and 3 were overall acceptable to us in the ponds, as it addressed keeping neighborhoods together, school proximity, and broken feeder issues. This new administration proposal, in my mind, threw all that out the window. Distance and travel time is a significant worry, as Waubonsie and Scullin are more than double the distance from our homes compared to Crone and Nequa. They are literally walking distance from us. Not to mention the additional traffic and congestion, as well as with the upcoming construction along the route to and from school, adding to the commute times. This significantly excludes our children from extracurricular activities and dips into the time that they could use for at-home schoolwork. The last-minute rationale to equalize capacity across the high schools is also very confusing to us. Why was this not part of the discussions from the beginning? None of the materials for the boundary committees reflects this criterion. Requiring closure of the freshman center was not mentioned either. Equitable school experience for all kids is one criteria. How, may I ask, is it equitable for students to be pulled from their schools due to boundary changes twice in under 4 years? Unjust is the most appropriate term. No other subdivision had to go through this repetitive change. We humbly and respectfully urge the board to vote no to the administration recommendations and retain our schools or revert back to concepts 1 or 3. Once again, I thank you for your time, effort, and careful consideration to this matter.
The next speaker is Sabrat Mishra, followed by Sushriya Devi Mishra.
Good evening, dear board members and staff administration. First, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your tremendous work you have been putting in this school boundary rezoning process. I moved to Naperville 4 years back, and then since then I have been a resident of Ashwood Park, and I have always wondered why kids have to travel twice the distance to a high school, or even Scullin, even if it is nearby. Why our kids do not go to Crone or Nequa? And then late 2021, I saw that this rezoning process is getting started. I saw that the board and school district has recruited a consulting firm which has expertise in all this process. So I was really happy and impressed. And the way the consulting firm was using the data and fact, it was really helpful for us with the transparency they were having with all the public hearing and committee meetings. But then all of a sudden on 28th December came with a surprise, and the default reactive approach of human being, the staff administration came back with a hybrid option, which was difficult to understand for me as a parent and also a Naperville, as a Naperville resident. And then I think Ashwood Park community started getting engaged because we were not able to understand what were all the facts, and information was used to come up with that particular plan. And then all of a sudden today, we heard about another reactive plan, which is not even close to the option 1 and 3, which was even voted earlier. And I think those two were one of the best options to fix the broken feeder system and also to give a better opportunity to our kids to learn at a school which is nearby to them. Now, going back to the point, Nequa and Waubonsie, the distance are almost twice. The commute time going back and forth is close to 1.5 hours or sometimes 2 hours if you're stuck with a train crossing on the railroad. We go and we observe, we have all our Twitter handle everywhere we go when international leaders are talking about climate change and climate control. But we let our kids sit on a bus or drive for 45 minutes where they could go and save some fuel and go to a school nearby in 10 minutes. We can reduce pollution, we can reduce green emission, and we can contribute to climate control as a kind of all the seniors and abide citizens of this country. Let's give those time back to our kids so that they can use it wisely. They don't need to wake up at 5 o'clock, or some senior high schoolers, they drive by themselves. Don't let them drive in a panic mode where they can miss their class for 5 minutes and they're crossing a railroad. It's risky. We all know what is the driving statistics and car incidents of teenage driving. So I humbly request this board to go back and reconsider either option 1 and 3 and give the time back to our dear children, because
Ms.
they are the
Donahue, speaker's time has
Thank you.
ended.
Thank you. Next speaker is Sushriya Devi Mishra, followed by Shri Yalamate.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Shashriya Devi Mishra. I'm 11 years old, a student, a 6th grader at Scullin Middle School, and I'm a resident of Ashwood Park. I'd like to thank the board for everything they do for our school district. There has been a recent change 2 hours ago, and I found out that I would be going to Obanzi. And there are a few issues here for students like me, especially in Ashwood Park. The first thing I'd like to start off with is the distance. For commute time, if we have to go with the minimum time, it would be at least 30 minutes. And we have to cross a train track. That means that if there's traffic or if a train is crossing by, this could take an hour or more for us. And now, as we have heard, there are teenagers driving. It could be very risky, especially in the Chicago weather where it can be very icy. The second and main thing I'd like to mention today is that Ashwood Park is the southernmost forest, and it's not just that, it's also the academics here that really matters. As we all know, high school is a very critical point in any student's life. The grades that you have matter, the friendships, the impact, everything here really matters, and it makes a big set on a student's life. When we go, and we could be late for any class, but the main thing here is I could miss out on a lot of fun activities like before and or school after school activities. And this makes a big difference because here's where we could meet a lot of friends, but this is also where we could learn a lot about different subjects. Being late to this gives not only a bad impression to others, it can also lower your confidence. You won't know what's going around in the environment around you. As we all know, grades are a very important part of high school, and being late to a class, you could be having a low grade. And I don't think anybody here wants that. So I humbly request the board to please move us to a high school that's closer to us, more efficient and convenient for us, so that we could have a very fun and easy educational life. Thank you.
Shri Yalamate is next, followed by Sarah George.
Thank you for your time, board. My name is Shrikant Alamati. I have 2 kids who go to 4th grade and 6th grade. Right before the proposal that was presented 2 hours before, I was gung-ho on, hey, my kid is moved from Peterson to Scullin, losing some friends to Crone. Now we are changing that to Crone. Now he's losing his friends again, right? So there was a proposal that made him lose friends twice. But that changed just before now, right? So now he will lose his friends once. So we know that when we bought the house, we are going to Abanchi. And we know that the time it takes is twice and all that. But I was hoping that this boundary committee selections will change that and reduce the time. To put in perspective, as everyone is saying, it's 8 traffic lights, 1 rail track, and double the distance compared to 2 traffic lights to Nequa, right? So I'm hoping that you can correct that. We are up, option 1 or 3 doesn't matter. It will work for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah George, followed by Kriti Podala.
Dear respected board members, administrators, concerned parents, and friends, a very good evening to all of you. I would like to take this opportunity to share my personal story, how this new administrative concept would affect my children emotionally, socially, and break my family's well-being. I'm Sarah George, a mother of 4 children. My children currently attend Kendall and Crone schools. We moved to Ponds of Ashwood Park in 2018. Before moving to Ponds in Ashwood Park, we lived in Tallgrass, and they were attending Fry Elementary School. However, since our house was sold before we could finish building our home in Ponds, we rented a house with Peterson as the elementary, anticipating our children would attend a science school under Ashwood Park that was Peterson in 2017. So my children moved from Fry Elementary to Peterson in 2017. And finally, when we moved to Ponce in 2018, a boundary change occurred in 2018, and we were assigned to Kendall Elementary, Crone as our middle school, and Nequa as our high school. Therefore, in 2018, my children had to again go through the school change, and it was a very challenging situation. It was a huge challenge for them and us as a parent. It was not a smooth transition for us as they lost all their friends from Fry and then Peterson, and now that they are in Kendall, they have built good relationships with all their friends. Now they have made some good friends there. We are very happy with the Kendall school. The staff was very supportive. They were very welcoming. Our children are very settled now. Just after 2 years of boundary changes, from 2018, I started hearing about the boundary changes again and have been closely following all the concepts made in the committee and the board meetings. None of the meetings or concepts presented prior to December 20th said we will have a school change again. Suddenly, with the new concept which got introduced from the board on December 20th, devastated our children's well-being most, I feel. From all the subdivisions, it's my children who are affecting, I feel. Our children will be affected most from this big change everybody has proposed from the board from December 20th. And today also I heard a new concept which will again not support my children's well-being. They will have no friends to go with them to the high school or the middle school. They will be left alone. All the studies have proven the school change for a high schooler or the middle schooler impacts them big time, socially, emotionally, and what all. I would strongly disapprove of this new concept of moving the Ponce to different school. When all others would go to the same school, my children will be entirely moving into a different school with no new.
Ms. Donahue, speaker's time has ended.
Thank you very much.
Kriti Podola, followed by Eva George.
Hi, my name is Kriti. I'm from Ashford Park Community in Naperville. I'm in 6th grade in Scullin Middle School. So I heard that there's an option for going from Scullin to Waubonsee High School, and there's also an option from going to Crone to Nequa. So I have one of my high school friends told me that it takes them 30 minutes. They wake up at 5 every day. They go on the bus at 6:30, and it takes them 30 minutes. But if there's a gate, it takes them an hour, which is time waste. If you go to Nequa, it takes like 5 to 10 minutes to get there. There's no gate, and you might have time for extra curriculum, more activities to do. And I just have one question. Can you please help us understand why you gave us the option for Waubonsee when it's like 45 minutes away, when we can just takes more, it gives like more trouble to the parents. If we miss the bus, then they have to take us there, and it's a lot of trouble. And I just want the board meeting people to consider this. I'm okay with option 1 and 3. Thank you.
George, followed by Matthew George.
Dear respected board members and school administrators, my name is Eva George, and I'm a 6th grader at Crone Middle School. I live in the Ponds of Ashford Park South. I wish to tell you how I will be affected by the proposed boundary changes you are looking to make. My siblings and I don't support these changes as we were recently forced to leave Peterson to go to Kendall just 3 school years ago. We had to make new friends and went through tough adjustments. Now we are being told that we would go back to Peterson, then Crone, and then go to Waubonsee, essentially breaking us away from all of our classmates, all of whom would go to Nequa except me and my siblings. The very first criteria mentioned on the priority boundary change criteria list is demographic considerations, stating that ensuring student academic, social, and mental health needs are met. Moving me and my siblings away from our friends and classmates would do anything but ensure our overall academic, social, and mental well-being. You are changing our schools in such a short time, and that is just not fair. We as students from the Ponds are essentially being bullied because you are forcing us to go through this, and we have no other option but to put up with the changes over and over again. The transition from middle school to high school, as you are aware, is very important. There are many group projects that require classmate cooperation and effort. Studies show that changing schools to where there are no existing peer relationships causes students to have less satisfaction and lower overall well-being. Kids who have little to no peers to connect with may begin to withdraw from school and social activities. In my research into this, I came across a study from the 1998 American Journal of Education where researchers analyzed data from over 13,000 middle schoolers, showing that even one change of peer groups between middle and high school has negative impact on academic success and finishing high school. I want to thank you for your time listening to me and hearing my concerns. I hope you take them into consideration. Thank you again.
Matthew George, followed by Kartha Kenyan Ganapathy.
Hello, everyone. I first want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my concerns. My name is Matthew George, and I am a 5th grader at Kendall Elementary School. I live at the Ponds of Ashford Park South. I had to change schools from Peterson in 2018 and moved to Kendall. Now, after being in Kendall for 3 years, my brother, sister, and I are being told we have to move to new schools again without my classmates. During the pandemic, it has been hard to adjust with the various changes. Having friends has made this difficult situation easier. I hope you understand how much friendships mean now more than ever for kids in school. As I prepare to go to Crow next year, well, I don't even know where I will go now. I am afraid that all my friends from Kendall will get separated from me as they will go to Neuqua and I will go to Waubonsie. At first, we thought the change would not be so drastic based on concepts 1 and 3. It would only affect one of my siblings for a couple of years, but would catch up with Crone and Neuqua afterwards. Now, the new proposal makes me really worried, and it would add more changes for me, my brothers and sisters. It would mean no continuation of friendships because I would go to Scullin and Waubonsie, unlike my classmates who would go to Crone and Neuqua. This is really hard for me to understand or accept. I beg you to think about and consider what I said about my concerns regarding this new proposal and make the right decision for our school boundary assignments. Thank you.
Kartha Kenyan Ganapathy is next. Jeannie, he's number 20. So do we have time for?
We do.
For 1 or 2?
We'll have time for 2.
2, okay.
Respected Superintendent, Board President, and members of the board, good evening. My name is Karthikeyan Ganapathy. I live in Ashwood Park. I have 2 kids, an 8th grader and a 3rd grader. First of all, I want to appreciate the service you have been doing to our community. As elected members and the leaders of our community, you have a tremendous responsibility in shaping up the future of our kids and communities. I'm deeply disappointed with the changes you are making. The last minute changes just happened 2 hours ago. What you have been doing to our kids in our community is simply devastating. I'm not sure if you know that Ashwood Park, Ashwood Ponds, and Ashwood Creek is one community. We do a lot of special events all throughout the year. Our kids are growing up together. Kids have friends in all these communities, and they are studying together. They're growing up together. They participate in social events, cultural events, and all other extracurricular activities together. Now, you have been separating them. You're not giving an option for them to grow up together. Like Nag has mentioned, mistakes were made in 2008. That sent Ashwood Park to Waubonsie instead of sending us to a closer school, which is Neuqua. There is a pressing need for boundary change at this time for our community. The time is right now. You need to make changes that address our community by sending our kids to Neuqua Valley. There are communities which are very close to Waubonsie. They are going to Neuqua Valley. And in District 204, we are
commuting farthest to the high school. We also live in District 204. We do have equal rights like others have. Like already other kids have mentioned, we don't want our kids to travel drowsy in the morning all the way crossing the railroad, causing a lot of safety concerns and all that. Like other communities have mentioned in the prior, and you have kindly addressed all those for them, but you have put everything on us. I kindly request you to please use your positions as leaders of our school district to demonstrate that IPSD.
Ms. Donahue, speaker's time has ended.
Thank you so much.
So we'll have two more speakers, N.K. Bojan and Praveen Matufa.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of the board. It's a very difficult process to get things right, and we all understand that. And there was a lot of data-driven analysis done. There was a set of guiding principles put in place, and we had option 1 and 3, and it was voted. And unanimously, option 1 was 70% in favor. I'm trying to understand how a last-minute change came about. The first thing that baffles me is really the distance. When you look at geographically how we are located, that was one of the guiding principles. You'd have to think about that. Again, these new concepts have nothing that would support such a thought process or a guiding principle. And it's going to be affecting the after school or before school classes. And it's not going to be an ideal situation for the kids that come from our community. And so I strongly recommend considering option 1, keeping Ashwood Park together, and discount the other options that are being debated right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Praveen Matufa is the last speaker. Thank you.
Good evening, board. Firstly, I would like to thank you for the opportunity. I would like to thank the parents and the students and the kids that have come, and they have trust and belief in this board to make a good decision. Today's evening is not one more evening where you're giving a hearing for public to talk about their opinions. This is about the future generation we are building, the concerns of the parents, and it impacts social, mental, and the physical abilities for these kids to go back and sit in your positions in making decisions for future. So I would like to kindly consider the pain that is going through the parents, the impact that the kids would have as you are taking decisions. And this decision should be applauded by the community, by the future generation. And we want you to consider in full kindness and in full balanced approach while taking this decision. Thank you so much for your consideration. Looking forward to it.
Very much. We now move to our consent agenda and superintendent report. We will start with the superintendent report. Dr. Talley.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue, members of the board, and the Indian Prairie community. I'll start off my comments by saying how happy I am that we were able to open school today. As I mentioned in the email that went out last week, we have to continue to look at staffing across our schools to determine if we have to close a school or schools due to lack of staffing. Last night, my team met virtually at 5 p.m. to get an update on our schools. Yes, there were some people out today. The good thing is that our school administrators felt that they could cover the absences from within. I want to thank all of our administrators and all staff members. They have been covering classes for those who have been out. This work is not easy for our staff as they have had to step in and do double duty. Their work is very much appreciated, and we will continue to look at these staffing issues on a daily basis. Last week, I also shared information about how we would start school today, Monday. In that letter, I shared that we would be in person and that the option to go remote was not something that the state gave us
or gave our district or any district. I want to explain my letter since I've received some emails from parents still asking about remote. The state, since March of 2021, has said that schools will offer in-person learning. The state has limited remote learning to those who are out for quarantine. This has been repeated by the state multiple times, even up till last week. The Illinois State Board of Education has been very much focused on in-person learning versus remote learning all year, and the governor reiterated a focus on in-person learning. As superintendent, I can close a school for emergency reasons. These reasons include lack of staffing or if there's a high concentration of positive cases in the school. We might also have issues with busing that will force us to modify our schedules. We have to look at each school one by one for these closures. If there is an emergency closure for the entire school system, as some districts have done this past week, those days have to be made up at the end of the school year. A district has a maximum of 5 days a year it can use for emergency days. The districts that were open last week and then shut down for emergency closures were not offering remote at all. No learning was happening. They were closed for emergency issues. We cannot offer remote learning on a case-by-case basis, as some have asked us to do, or make it hybrid like last year. Making such individual decisions creates a staffing issue trying to determine who would provide the instruction for the child, since we are not doing room and Zoom as we did last year. We do not have a group of teachers waiting in the wings to do remote learning. It would require complete reshuffling of our teachers and students to start to create remote teachers and in-person teachers, and I don't think any of us want to do that with our students. I know that there are a number of people who have concerns. Based upon the data that has been shared with the superintendents from the DuPage Health Department and a meeting that was held last Monday, and what I put on my email to you, staff and students who have the vaccine have better opportunities not to become infected. We know that those who have been in the hospital have been, for the most part, without vaccination. Our school staff are continuing with the mitigation strategies that we've put in place all year. They are redoubling their efforts to ensure that everyone is following the mitigation strategies correctly. I continue to ask you to monitor your children and do not send any children to school who have symptoms. There have been some questions raised by parents about shield testing as another mitigation strategy. As a district, we did look at shield testing earlier this school year as part of the Test to Stay protocol. At the time, students would have to be tested weekly to participate, and there were concerns at the schoolhouse level about the amount of time required to have students out of classroom for testing. We did not pursue and we are currently using another agency to do the Test to Stay program. I have stated in my responses to emails that we will examine SHIELD again, and we will need to examine the testing protocol and who does the testing. Our nurses are currently overworked, and I have to be very careful not to add more to their plates. Other districts are using SHIELD as a testing done after school. However, those districts are able to find people to do the testing. Again, we will investigate the testing and we'll report back to the community. I wrote an email to them today. They have sent an email back to me, meaning the testing organization for SHIELD, and we will set up a meeting to talk next week. We continue to navigate these ever-changing rules and requirements as carefully as we can. We continue to use our experts from the CDC, the Illinois Department of Public Health, and the DuPage Health Department, as we did last year and this year. They are the experts we are using to help guide our procedures. Finally, we continue to need substitutes in the district. This is an issue that many districts are dealing with. I want to let you know, you do not need to have a teaching degree in order to be a substitute. You just need to have a bachelor's degree. People can sub for as little time as they want, 1 day a week, and we even have half-day subs in our schools. And so if this is of an interest, call or contact our HR department, and they will give you information about how you can become a substitute. And now I'll turn this over back to Ms. Donahue.
Thank you. Next, we move to our consent agenda items. Please identify yourself as you make a motion or second. I need a motion for the approval of consent agenda items D through G.
I move to approve consent agenda items D through G.
Is there a second?
Natasha Grover, second.
Any discussion? Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Ms. Grover,
Yes.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Ms. Fosdick,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Rising.
Yes.
The motion passes. We will now have a boundary update presented by Dr. Talley and Mr. Matt Shipley.
Mr. Shipley and I will tag team for our presentation, and thank you very much. Ms. Donahue and members of the Board of Education, tonight we want to share some slightly revised plans for our boundaries. Based upon what was discussed at the last meeting, we have updated our plans. Tonight we will share responses to the questions that the Board of Ed members asked at the end of the meeting and items brought forward to some emails from the community. Over winter break, we worked with RSP on these revisions throughout the whole process. We still are committed with the administrative proposal that was shared at the last meeting. That proposal was created through our work with RSP. Tonight, we will share some modifications to the plan that address numbers at Gombert, Longwood, Georgetown, and Fry, to name just a few of the schools. What we are discussing tonight continues to support the Board of Ed principles, the overall principles, and overall criteria for the boundaries. Mr. Shipley, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, board members. As Dr. Talley mentioned, we were tasked with following up on several questions that were posed at the December 20th meeting. We'll go through these items. We have made some changes related to these items, and in a few cases, we've reviewed possible options, but are still recommending to stay consistent with what we did with the December 20th proposal. The first area that we were asked to look at was the feeder split, specifically any splits that were under 15%. The second area was to look at Young and Brooks in the northwest corner of the district. Those schools were both at a high capacity level with our recommendation on the 20th. Similarly, Granger Middle School was the highest of the middle schools, and that's in that northwest area as well. We were also asked to review the low income percentage, which had increased at Gombert approximately 15% from the current numbers. I think it went from about 37% to 51%. And then finally, we were asked to provide an update on what we thought was possible for transportation options and the potential costs that would have if we offered transportation to grandfathered students. So I'll start first by showing a revised feeder split. This is just the elementary schools that are incomplete feeders. So this is a revised based on our recommendation. We believe that the revised recommendation makes improvements based on not only our original recommendation, but also the current boundaries we have in place now. So our original recommendation had 8 broken feeders at the elementary school to middle school transition and 3 broken middle to high school feeders. This revised recommendation has removed 2 of those broken feeders. The 2 schools that are removed are Georgetown and Kendall. The revised recommendation also has removed a broken feeder from Crone Middle School. So Crone is now a complete feeder into Neuqua Valley High School. The board had asked we look at feeders where we had percentages less than 15%, and our lowest elementary percentage feeder is now at 27%. At the middle school level, you'll see we do have still at a 21% feeder split, 21% to Mattia Valley High School. That's based on next year's numbers. That will increase and become closer to a 33-67 split as the Fox Valley Mall area starts to develop and come online.
So overall, again, we believe we've made some improvements to the feeder system, both on what we presented on the 20th and our current feeder system. The only other note I'll point here, we're showing Brookdale as a split feeder, but all current students from Brookdale would attend Hill. That is a split feeder based on an area that does not generate students at this time. Secondly, as mentioned, we were asked to look at the enrollment and potential enrollment or any changes for the Young, Brooks, and Granger area. We have kept Brooks enrollment the same, which is a projection of about 706 students for next year, with a range of 680 to 690 students after. So that will make that our highest elementary school. We do believe that building has the capacity to sufficiently serve and equitably serve those students. I will point out that is one of our buildings that has an addition on it. There's an addition that was added in 2002. And as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, that school had over 760 students. So that is a school, and that is an area that has seen those sort of enrollments in the past and in the recent past. We were able to provide a revised proposal that drops Young's enrollment down by about 80 students. And the reason that we prioritize reducing Young's enrollment over Brooks or potentially other elementary schools is because Young currently holds and will continue to hold a self-contained program. That's our only self-contained program area in the that northwest area. So we wanted to make sure that if there was any school where we were going to be able to reduce enrollment, that we prioritize that school, and we have. Granger's enrollment projections do stay the same under the revised proposal. Again, that would be for about 990 students next year. However, over the next 5 years, that is projected to go under 900 down to about 880. Again, similar to Brooks, this is a school that's been our highest enrolled middle school, or one of our highest enrolled middle schools in recent memory. It has been close to 1,100 students as recently as 3 or 4 years ago. So this is a school that has had those higher enrollment numbers in the past. So with that, I'm going to just kind of walk through the map and show the specific areas where we have made updates since our December 20th proposal. There's 7 areas at the elementary school that are noted here. I'll point out that it's really 4 areas, 4 changes. A couple of the changes kind of work together. And I'll point out some of these changes, are changes that really have no sort of drawbacks or no, we really feel like we're not really, the recommendation is a real strong recommendation. There are areas where we've improved in one area, but maybe that's been a little inconsistent with another criteria. So I'll try to point that out as we walk through as well. So the first area on the map, which is labeled number 1, is the Country Woods Apartments. We had that going to May Watts Elementary in our December 20th proposal, and we are now recommending it stay at Longwood. We are recommending that just based on looking at what Longwood's capacity is. We were very sensitive to the total enrollment at Longwood. That's one of our smallest schools. It's one of our oldest buildings. We do feel, after really looking at it and crunching the numbers, that we will be able to add those additional students back to Longwood. Longwood would see about a 20 student decrease from its current numbers, even with this area being added back to Longwood. Making this change does allow May Watts, a change that impacts May Watts Elementary, and that's the Metro 59 Apartments and Union Square development. That would move into May Watts, whereas we had shown it as Owen on the December 20th proposal. So that creates a little bit more of a continuous boundary, gets it a little bit closer to the May Watts building as opposed to Owen. Also addresses some potential overcrowding at Owen in some of the later years of this proposal. Change number 3 is an area by Steck and Young. So this is the Legacy Fields, Abington Trace Condos, and Woodland Lakes area. This is an area that currently attends Steck, and we are recommending moving it back into Steck from Young. So this is the change that does reduce in total enrollment at Young. It also reduces students impacted by this proposal, as these students already attend Steck Elementary. The drawback is that we do kind of lose that clean break along New York Road there. However, if you're familiar with that area, that area between New York and the street directly, the main thoroughfare North Liberty is really kind of broken up. So there's actually really no through street for those communities that goes to Liberty or that would go to Young. So this really does make, in our opinions, a sense from a transportation perspective, and just from allowing those schools to continue with their community. So that is the third change, or the third change we've made as part of this revised administrative proposal. 4 and 5 relate to the White Eagle, Georgetown, and Gombert area. So this is the change that will address the Gombert free reduced lunch count, along with, again, changes to Georgetown and White Eagle. So the first part is that TGM apartment community. That's the kind of the triangle property with Route 59, Route 34, and 75th Street. We are recommending moving that to White Eagle. It was shown as Georgetown in our December 20th proposal. That area currently attends White Eagle, so again, this is a change that reduces the students impacted by our boundary adjustments. And that's an area that does have some concentration of free and reduced lunch percentage, so that's going to increase the free and reduced lunch percentage at White Eagle, where we feel there was both total enrollment capacity and the demographic ability to support those students. By making that change, that allowed us to bring a small area, the area west of Eola and south of Montgomery and north of Ridge Avenue, from Gombert back into Georgetown. So this is an area that currently attends Georgetown, so again, it does impact that students impacted by change number. And this is what's going to kind of balance that free and reduced lunch percentage a little bit at Gombert. So with this change, Gombert's free and reduced lunch percentage will reduce from about 51% into around 44%. And again, that's going to help balance that number between Georgetown and Gombert a little bit too. Gombert will see a decrease in free and reduced lunch students attending Georgetown from its current numbers. The drawback of this change is we do lose, some continuity of the boundaries, some of that clean break along Montgomery Road, and then that is partially breaking up that neighborhood in that area. And the final changes that we're recommending at the elementary level are in the southwest portion of the map, and that's with Peterson Elementary and Fry Elementary. Again, going back to what's more the current boundaries, so we are reducing our students impacted number, and this is going to be important as this is the important change that helps clean up the feeder system a little bit too. But it does move it's part of the Ashwood Point area back into Peterson, and the Anderman Acres area back to Fry Elementary. 4 changes then from our December 20th proposal at the middle school. The first is the Fox Valley Mall area. So this area currently is not generating any students, but we are recommending it attends Still as opposed to Hill. So this is primarily just reviewing that Hill has total enrollment capacity to support this new development as it comes online. The second area is the small area, the Ogden Point condos. This is an area just south of Route 34. It's marked number 2 on the map. We're recommending moving this from Still to Fisher. This is a relatively small area, but this does complete a feeder system into Fisher. That previously was going into Still, and that resulted in Georgetown having one of those small feeders where the break was less than 15%. And then the third and fourth changes are again in the southwest corner, and this is just adjusting an area between Skull and Crone. This is the change that allows Crone to have a complete feeder into Neuqua Valley and evens out the Scullin feeder between Neuqua and Waubonsee. I will point out that this does have the potential drawback, or does have the drawback. There is, especially as you get to the south, the far south area of that map, that there will be students who could walk or be closer to Crone who are attending Scullin. But again, that's necessary to complete that feeder. So as mentioned, we have reduced the number of students impacted from our December 20th proposal. So we've gone from having about 2,800 students impacted to about 2,400 students impacted. And you can see how that breaks across all 3 levels. Again, we've made no changes at the high school level, so we're seeing a reduction at both the elementary and middle school. We continue to recommend grandfathering and recommend a pretty comprehensive grandfathering policy. This is significantly more grandfathering options that have been available in the past when the district has done boundary adjustments. So we are recommending that the board approve allowing all rising fifth graders, so current fourth graders, be allowed the option to grandfather into their previous building. Again, we are recommending that the board allow rising 7th and 8th graders the option to grandfather into their previous building. And then at the high school level, allowing all rising 10th, 11th, and 12th graders the option to grandfather. That would be all students that are currently at that high school building, as well as all students that are currently at their middle school building, having that option to grandfather. I will emphasize we are recommending that it's an option so that families could choose to stay at their current enrolled school or move to the new school. Dr. Talley will go into a little bit more detail how we would recommend the timing and implementation of that grandfathering policy. Finally, I'll just cover what transportation we are hoping to provide to our grandfathered students. Again, this is something the board had asked us to continue to explore over break on the December 20th meeting. At this time, we still feel that the district cannot guarantee transportation for grandfathered students. But I do want to emphasize that we cannot guarantee it. We want to make every effort to provide it and to continue to investigate if we can provide it. We do know that this means we will be asking families to make a decision about grandfathering without knowing if transportation will be available. We've not made this decision lightly. We understand that that's going to be a challenge for families. But unfortunately, we just do not feel like we're in the position where we can guarantee transportation at this time. The main challenge to that is the availability of bus drivers. So I want to emphasize it's not a financial decision. It's not because of a lack of desire to provide it. It really is just knowing where we currently are at with our bus drivers, the availability of bus drivers, both with our district and nationally. As Dr. Talley covered in his remarks, we are aware of school districts who have had to cancel school this week because of a lack of availability of bus drivers. And that's been a continuing theme throughout this school year. We have been fortunate that we've not been impacted, but we have seen it with our neighboring districts. Just for reference, we do currently have about 240 bus drivers on staff. To be considered fully staffed, we would have 270. So we start every day with 30 bus drivers under what we need to run a full route package. And we really make it work on a daily basis through consolidating routes, through running additional sweeper routes through neighborhoods, and really coming up with solutions on an almost daily basis. The second reason that we just don't feel we can guarantee this transportation at this time is because we do not know how many students will elect the grandfathered options. Because of how comprehensive our grandfathering options are that we are providing, we're estimating there's about 1,400 students who will be eligible for grandfathering. And so that's a pretty significant variable for our transportation team to really be able to map out what's possible. With that said, I do want to say we will continue to make every effort to investigate this and continue to evaluate if we are able to provide transportation. So our proposed commitment is as follows. We will keep the same number of drivers and routes as the current year. So we will, at a minimum, look to keep 240 bus drivers and hopefully work towards that fully staffed number of 270 throughout this year and into the summer as we go into the next school year. Our transportation team will then regularly staff and route all regular routes or routes that are not impacted or affected by our grandfathering policy. After that is completed, we will then look at our availability to serve grandfathered students, and that could be a combination of solutions, whether that is routing grandfathered students on existing routes, creating new routes for the grandfathering students, looking at shuttles possibly between two impacted schools so that a student's dropped off at their new school but then shuttled to the grandfather school. We will look and evaluate at any possible solution. And then on a timing based on when we are asking families to notify us, we believe we'll be able to evaluate this and be able to inform families if we are providing grandfathered transportation by spring break, so the end of March.
Thank you, Mr. Shipley. The administrative proposal is built upon the priority board criteria. There were a number of criteria that the board selected. There was priority ones and then secondary ones. You can see the criteria above. Therefore, I will not read them to you. I will say that as you look at the proposal, you should see that these criteria were considered and in many ways overall achieved. It is never possible to ensure that everyone sees things in a positive way when you're dealing with boundary changes. However, if you look carefully at the proposal, you will see that this proposal does have demographic considerations, fiscal considerations, a utilization of the schools and planning for future enrollment, and finally, does a much better job of ensuring neighborhoods are intact. There were secondary criteria as well. We took these into consideration. However, the primary criteria were considered first. With that said, you will find that these secondary boundary criteria are incorporated in the proposals. Implementation. We plan to implement the proposal at the start of the 22-23 school year. Parents will receive communication from us, and we will need to have people making decisions about grandfathering by February the 11th. It is important to know that when you make the decision about grandfathering, that cannot be changed. It impacts staffing at our schools, especially at the high school level. High schools are already, as one of our students said, our student representative, she mentioned that they are selecting classes. 8th graders are selecting classes now for next year. 9th, 10th, and 11th graders are selecting classes. And then based upon class selections, we do staffing at the schools. Teachers have to be informed by a certain date about what they will be teaching and where they'll be teaching. And so we cannot have people make changes because it will impact the staffing for next year. Unfortunately, as Mr. Shipley mentioned, we know that people have to make decisions, understanding that grandfathering, that transportation may or may not be provided. You have to think for yourself what's important for you. Is it for your child to be at that school or not? And that's how you have to make the decision. And I know that that is not an easy decision at all. And it is something that we wish we could provide the information to you now. But it is just not something that we can do at this moment. Since December 20th meeting, we have reviewed the boundaries and made some slight modifications. The revised proposal is still connected to the Board of Ed principles. The plan equalizes all 3 high schools. The freshman center at Neuqua Valley was never built as a freshman center. It was built as actually Crone Middle School. Though there were freshmen, there was also a freshman center at Waubonsee. It too was originally Granger and now is Fisher. Mattia never had a freshman center. The proposed plan allows our high schools to be more evenly populated with enrollments of roughly around 2,700. Finally, this administrative proposal combines overall what was found to be good from the boundary committee of the other 2 concepts. We'll now take any questions.
Ms. Grover.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Dr. Talley. A couple of questions I have. Regarding grandfathering, what if I am a 6th grader or a freshman and I decide I want to go to my new school next year, but then back to my old school the following year? Can I do that? Or say I want to stay in my current school this year, but then I decide, oh, I want to go to the other school. Do you follow my?
You can always go to your home school. And so let's take your example. Let's just pretend, for example, I'm a sixth grader at Crone, and I'm supposed to go to, I'm making this up, Granger. And to your point, you're saying, I decide as a sixth grader, I'm going to go to Granger.
No, I'm going to go to Crone in 7th grade, but then I decide I want to go to Granger in 8th grade because now I have the busing because maybe the grandfathering has come in, or for whatever reason.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
No. But you can always go to your home school.
Right. Okay. The other question I have regarding the freshman center, do you anticipate when the freshman center will be no longer a freshman center, or?
It looks, I would say somewhere around the 25-26 or the 26-27 school year. Probably more likely 26-27 school year.
Okay. My last question is regarding, I'm glad to see that since the December 20th update, we've looked into the demographics and looked into keeping neighborhoods intact. Looking at the south end, we had a lot of, Ashwood consists of many different subdivisions. You can say from like there's Point, there's Creek, there's Heights, I mean, all that. Can you speak to how you changed from December 20th to accommodate to keep that neighborhood intact?
Sure. So that the big changes in that area since December 20th have primarily been to improve the feeder system. The split, that was an area that was split between that was split between Scullin and Crone, or was going to Crone, but then coming back to Waubonsie, which was creating that low feeder percentage for Crone. So we've revised that area to attend Scullin, which then creates a complete feeder for Crone, but still splits Scullin between Waubonsie and Neuqua at close to 50-50. The Ashwood Park area is split from Ashwood Creek. So the Ashwood Creek area is that south of 111th area by Crone. So that is still split. That is currently split. So the Ashwood Park area currently goes to Waubonsie, and that Ashwood Creek area currently goes to Neuqua. The one small change is the Ashwood Ponds area, which is aligning now with the full Ashwood Park area. So I think, as was mentioned in public comment, that's about a 13 home community that is switching from Neuqua and from Kendall, and was a very small feeder from as a result of being the only area there that goes to Kendall. That's now aligning with the full Ashwood Park area. But there is still a split between Ashwood Park and Ashwood Creek.
Okay, those are my only questions. Thank you.
Ms. Dumming. She there? The light not on?
The light is on. You're muted, Susan, if we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that you went to me, Ms. Donahue. Thank you. I did have a question. When I looked at Springbrook, Patterson, Bilta, and Graham, are there particular, do we see any particular usage for any of those schools as we look at their lower percentage utilization of those buildings?
Like for self-contained?
What were the schools again? I apologize, I didn't hear.
Springbrook, Patterson, Bilta, and Graham. When we look at future capacities of those, they're on the lower end. So I'm just wondering, are there particular opportunities that we see at those schools that can be for building utilization that can benefit other areas?
Yes, there are from either special education programs or pre-K programs. Those are some of the programs that are in those schools.
Yeah, I do believe all four of those schools host either a special education program, a self-contained special education program, or a pre-K program. and we can continue to do so. You know, I'll speak a little bit, and we talked at the December 20th meeting also about facilities. One of the things that I think's you know, exciting about this process and ending this process and having some long-term certainty about which buildings will be positioned to support those self-contained programs is our ability to invest in those facilities to specifically serve those students. We've had a challenge in this district over the past several years where those programs have kind of bounced around based on where there's capacity. So we did, as part of this process, we made some assumptions on the front end about where we would want to keep those programs. Again, not one of the schools you mentioned, Board Member Deming, but we wanted to prioritize keeping a program at Young, for example. And that's one of the reasons we further made a change with this proposal, even from the 20th. We're also looking at adding a self-contained program at Peterson. And so we were very conscientious of keeping the enrollment a little lower at Peterson so that we could add a program there. And so really knowing that those programs are going to be in the same place for a sustained period of time, I hope allows us to invest in those classrooms, maybe redesign those classrooms, recognize that those classrooms are going to be used very differently than they were built for, and you know, potentially reshape that. That may mean tearing down walls and doing some hard construction. It may mean just looking at the furniture and fixtures that we put in those. But hopefully, as part of this process, we've gained that certainty and can invest in those spaces in a way that's going to better serve those populations.
Thank you. So as we look with the changes that we've made at the elementary level, Georgetown and Longwood will remain our two Title I schools. I guess it may be a little difficult, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. Do we know of any particular enhanced opportunities that Title I funds will be able to provide us as we look to really try and you know, provide opportunities to those two schools that they may not innately be able to garner, you know, outside of school? Many of those students are going to be very dependent upon the school resources that we can offer to, you know, build and sustain their academic growth. So do we have any idea on additional Title I programs or plans that we'll be able to offer those particular students, or will those come? Do you see those continuing to come later?
Yeah. So we currently at Georgetown and Longwood have a grant that is in place for the students and families, which we hope will be able to continue going forward with next school year. I think it's a 2-year grant, or it may be a 3-year grant. So that should continue. Not just using Title I money, though. We can continue to use federal funds to support summer programs at those schools to make them even a longer program if necessary. So we have to look at what are the individual needs of those schools and then plan accordingly. Unfortunately, we are not necessarily receiving additional Title I money. In fact, our Title I money has decreased over time. So we want to be as efficient as possible with the use of the funds that we do have.
Thank you. One of the things that, one of the questions that I had asked at our last meeting was the concerns about some of our splits. So I just wanted to share that I am very pleased with the reduction or the more equitable splits amongst especially our middle to high schools. So I appreciate that. And I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Mr. Karubas.
I support the attendance area adjustments, but I do not support the implementation plan solely because of the transportation not being provided with grandfathering. Once again, I want to thank the Boundary Committee members, public input, the consultant, administration. Public input was heard. The administration provided valuable expertise specific to our district. According to Board Policy 7:30, the school district is divided into school attendance areas, and the superintendent will review the boundary lines as needed and make recommendations to the school board. That was done in this case. We started this journey wanting to fix the capacity issue with the boundary process. We've learned that doing so is not possible. Capacity issues have improved, but they're not fixed. Now we need to consider other means of solving some of the capacity issues. A few of the specific points I want to address regarding some of the comments, critique, and criticism we've received. The board has been accused of purposely segregating students based upon income. A more reasonable explanation for the variability in the percentage of students with free and reduced lunch population between the schools is the housing stock surrounding the schools. The school district doesn't determine the types of homes surrounding a school. Taking as a whole, each student in the district receives the same educational opportunities from the district. The educational opportunities do not differ because of the makeup of the student population. There are many differences based upon the needs of the students. For example, some schools may offer breakfast while others do not. But the teachers are of similar experience exist at all of our schools. Teachers are similarly prepared at all of our schools. Teachers are similarly paid at all of our schools. And teachers are similarly supported to effectively teach at all of our schools. That doesn't mean that poverty is not a consideration in providing education. Two aspects of poverty can be considered when working to understand whether some students from low-income households may benefit from additional or different supports for learning. The depth of the poverty, or how far below the national poverty level a family's income is, and the concentration of poverty within a school, or how many students within a given area are living in a low-income household. The U.S. Census Bureau defines deep poverty as living in a household with a total income of less than 50% of the poverty threshold. Illinois presently lacks the data to accurately characterize varying or average depth of poverty at the school district level. Although neighborhood levels of depth of poverty are being currently collected from the census, so hopefully some of that information will be available in the future. Data on the second aspect, that of poverty concentration, is currently available, and indeed counts as students that are already factored into the evidence-based funding formula in its calculation of adequacy. That formula includes some 28 variables, one of which is core income teachers, K through 3, for low income. And at different grade levels as well for low income. It's one of the variables. Also, another factor in the evidence-based funding determination of adequacy is not just the core teachers, but interventions for poverty, pupil support, extended day services, and summer school. Some studies suggest that the greater the proportion of students in a school who are living in poverty, the more supports those students, and indeed all the students in that school, need to achieve and thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. A number of studies suggest that there's a threshold or a tipping point of the percentage of students living in poverty, such as those with greater than 50 or 60% of the students in low-income households, above which learning needs increase dramatically. We talked about a number of additional supports that can be offered for the low-income population that result in positive impacts for students. Those with the largest effect include tutoring on a one-to-one basis, extended instructional time by lengthening the school day and providing instruction and targeted supports over the summer. In addition to supports for social emotional development and mental health. Furthermore, in looking at is my time up? Furthermore, in often looking at solving for one variable, such as the percentage of students that are free and reduced lunch, can cause second and third order impacts. For example, if you use busing to solve for balancing the demographics, that might have negative impacts on attendance or discipline or parent involvement. Most of the critics of the current recommended map involve a lens that focuses on one variable, neighborhood, a school, a family, or through one factor such as low income or ethnicity. And those points are valid, but this board needs to optimize for multiple dimensions. We are not able to optimize in one dimension because that causes hidden side effects in others. This board was elected to represent the whole district, not just a subdivision or just one of the guiding principles or one of the boundary criteria. The board is the voice of the community. That is the job that we are elected to do. We are subject to a code of conduct we all swore to. As a member of our local school board, I will do my utmost to represent the public interest in education by adhering to the following standards and principles. I will represent all school district constituents honestly and equally, and refuse to surrender my responsibilities to special interests or partisan political groups. I believe each school board member has done so. An additional part of the Code of Conduct states that I will respectfully listen to those communities with the board seeking to understand their views while recognizing that my responsibility to represent the interests runs to the entire community. I believe that each board member has done so. Why I do not support grandfathering. I'm concerned about the ability of the district to deliver. I do believe that the grandfathering is very generous, but I believe than what we have historically offered. But I believe that we should be required to offer busing with that level of grandfathering. Generally speaking, we're in a busing shortage, and more grandfathering equals more busing. I'm concerned about the cost of increased busing. I asked it at the last meeting, and we're unable to provide it at this meeting. We are struggling to provide busing in our current state. I question whether we'll be able to provide it with grandfathering next year. The plan is grandfathering students that can provide their own transportation and not grandfathering students without their transportation. What has changed since the last time we offered grandfathering? We did not offer busing. But the district has also changed since that time. Our demographics are changed, and we have, as a board, adopted an equity belief statement. That statement provides that we will provide similar educational opportunities, we will reduce barriers. It feels like the transportation plan is providing educational opportunities that result in an outcome that is inequitable for similarly situated students in the same grade. It feels like the transportation plan is creating a disparity in educational opportunities for similarly situated students in the same grade. It feels like the transportation plan is creating barriers for similarly situated students in the same grade. I'm aware of the history. I'm also aware of the demographics changes and the adoption of the equity statement. I respect the administration's suggestion with the implementation, and I recognize that other board members might disagree with me on that, and I respect that opinion as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jane?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Talley, for your work, and Mr. Shipley and your team for all of your work, especially through the holidays, to your efforts to try to listen to the community and make adjustments accordingly. Specifically, I really appreciate the keen examination and eye to some of the adjustments made, which you nicely described, Mr. Shipley, in the area of Georgetown and Gombart and Young and Steck, and you described all of that, so I won't ask any questions more about that, but I just want to know how much I appreciate you looking into that. I also appreciate the fact that this new or adjusted proposal impacts even less students than it did in the December 20th, which was already a substantial decrease from the concepts that were proposed or presented in the December 8th meeting. So that was, I believe, the right direction given what our students have faced these past 2 years, and that is something that is greatly appreciated and also reflected in your generous grandfathering proposal. I think it's important to remember that transportation historically wasn't provided, and although I understand Board Member Krubus's concerns, I think that context is important, that grandfathering, although proposed in the past, didn't necessarily offer transportation. Am I correct with that?
That is correct.
And historically, the grades that were, at least in the last boundary, process, what grades were grandfathered then?
When we opened Mattia, we grandfathered, I believe it was grades, rising juniors and seniors.
And did we offer that at the middle school and elementary?
We've always allowed those finishing only their terminal grade to stay.
So I really do appreciate the extension to rising 10th graders, rising 7th graders, in addition to the past. And I think it is also the right thing to do given the time we are in right now with COVID and remote learning and the year, just experiences our students have gone through. And we have heard in these board meetings, I think that is an appropriate response. But I want to clarify, if a student chooses to be grandfathered before February 11th, but then comes to find out that transportation is not offered, would they be able to withdraw their opting into being grandfathered? Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Good.
No, the decision one makes, whether to grandfather or not, and then they want to change either one, they can't because of the impact on staffing. And I know I've seen an email or two saying you can make exceptions. Once we go down the road of exceptions, it creates a problem, because once we do one exception, where do we stop? And I know the difficulty in this, but you have to make a decision about grandfathering regardless of transportation. And then if we are able to offer it, then that's a added thing that we can give. But I know the difficulty.
Okay, thank you. Another thing I wanted to mention is that we've heard the word equity used a lot in conversation, in emails, and in meetings, and I think it's important as a community that we revisit that word and what it means, right? Because equity doesn't necessarily mean equal. It means looking at the specific needs of our students and offering various resources in different ways so that they have the potential and the opportunity for equal success. So it's something that we've all heard, but I think as a community we need to revisit that word, and I believe the administration's proposal really does take equity, the demographic considerations in mind. We've heard from a lot of community members about transportation. Can you speak to that variable and that factor and how that might have been used as part of your calculations in this proposal?
So just specifically the development of the proposal as opposed to any grandfathering
Yeah.
related issues? Okay. Sure, you know, we recognize that in general, transportation correlates highly with proximity to school or to the assigned school. So in some ways, when we're talking about transportation, that we're also talking about just overall proximity. You know, that was something that was considered by our committee, and that's something that we've considered as we reviewed both concepts and put together our administrative recommendation. With that said, just based on where the buildings are located in our district and being unable to move buildings as part of this process, there are going to be some limitations. And you know, honestly, that's something that's seen at every school district, at least every school district I'm aware of. You know, there are similar stories in District 203 about families who drive by Naperville Central every morning to go to Naperville North. So, unfortunately, that is something that is a limiting factor for us in many districts. Specific to the high school, I'll point out that Matea Valley is our furthest north building. So to have a high school located that far north is going to have a ripple effect throughout the rest of the system. There are students that are closer to Waubonsie but have to go to Neuqua, who are closer to Waubonsie but go to Matea, based on that fact, and then that ripples down to that split between Waubonsie and Neuqua as well. Similarly, at the middle school, having Crone in such a far southwest location creates a similar challenge, and with Crone and Scullin being relatively close together, I think they're just around 2 miles from each other. You know, that creates some challenge in that area, the district as well. So it was considered. It was a secondary criteria. It was not one of the primary criteria. And then again, there are going to be limiting factors and challenges just based on where the buildings are located and where our students are located.
Okay, thank you. And I have one last question regarding our Title I schools, Georgetown and Longwood. Was it purposeful to keep these schools as Title I schools, or meaning did we want to keep them above the 40% threshold, or is that just how it worked out based on other factors and then also looking at student needs and what we could provide?
Question about it being purposeful is a great question. Mr. Karupas mentioned something about housing in the area and where people live. And I think that's one thing that we have to be very considerate of because of the fact that are we moving people away from what they can get to in an easy ability, or do we keep them where they where they're nearby where they're living? And so I think that's important. We looked very carefully at the programming because of the fact that both of those schools are over 40%. They have total Title I programming. We have a couple of other schools that have total Title I programming as opposed to a targeted approach. Under targeting approach, you can only provide services to those specific students who receive free and reduced meals in that building. And additionally, only staff who serve those children can receive professional development using Title I money. But by the fact that we have total Title I schools, it means that every child in that building benefits. Every teacher in that building is able to receive the additional professional development using Title I money. And so there was some purpose involved, as I mentioned, with regards to the fact that where people live and we want to keep them close to their buildings, that was part of it.
Okay, thank you. And that is it. Thank you so much.
Ms. Fosdick?
Okay. The first thing I want to ask, just for a point of clarification, Mr. Shipley, you said we have, and ideally staffed for bus drivers, we would have 270. Is that for the current routes that we have? That's not adding additional routes for grandfathered students?
Correct. That's as of today. That's
Okay.
every morning we're operating 30 drivers below what would be considered fully staffed.
Okay. Do we have, I'm sorry I didn't ask this before, so if you don't happen to know this off the top of your head, that's all right. Do you happen to know if every grandfathered student chose to stay and wanted transportation, how many additional bus drivers we would need? Or do we not know that at this point? You mentioned maybe 1,400 students, if everyone took that option.
The number of students will be eligible for grandfathering under our proposal would be about 1,400. Being able to really shake out how that would look with the bus routes is, we've done some high-level analysis of that, but we don't really have specifics at this time. So, I mean, in general, a regular route is about 50 students. So, you could figure based on that the number of routes. Again, that would be students though that are coming off, presumably are coming off a route. We're not necessarily adding routes, but we're potentially losing some efficiency in how we route. So that's why the number just becomes difficult, because it's not just looking at the number of students impacted. It's really trying to understand where they would be going, and whether it's point A or point B and everything like that.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. That is helpful, because it is kind of much like the whole boundary process, a Jenga game in some way, right? We move one piece and then another piece shifts, and it's hard to predict how far that goes. So I want to say thank you to the Boundary Committee, the community who's come to share their opinions. One thing I can assure the community of is that many people that we've gotten emails from or who have taken the time out of their evenings to come and speak at board meetings are asking to be heard. And I feel very comfortable saying, we are hearing you, we are listening, and I believe administration is doing the same. Unfortunately, hearing and giving each group or each community what would be ideal for them isn't always the same. And that's what I'm struggling with here. In a perfect world, we would all go to the closest school that would be very balanced, with complete feeders, and everyone would have transportation. So I do struggle with the fact, and I think many of the board members especially struggle with the fact, and administration, frankly, that we're not going to be able to give everyone exactly what would be their perfect situation. But acknowledging that, I think we have made a lot of improvements here. Echoing what Board Member Jane said, I am happy to see the number of students affected reduced, because we all know what our kids have been through, what we all have been through, especially the last couple of years, and I do think that's really important. In addition to that, that's why I believe the extended and generous grandfathering that you're recommending is really, really important for our kids' mental health, just to have the option. And to respond in some way to what, the transportation piece of that, yes, I would love if we could, and I know administration would love if we could just say, yes, we're gonna provide transportation. As Board Member Karuba said, he said maybe we shouldn't grandfather, or if we can't give transportation, or that should be a responsibility. It would be great if we could, and maybe we can, who knows, right? That's what you've said. We don't know yet. But in order for us to believe and support it, redistricting, right? I think that we have to believe that our students will have an equitable experience at any of our schools. We believe in all of our schools and all of our teachers. So while I respect that students who live near one another or go to school with students at one age, may go to school with other kids at a different time, I think that I believe, or I know that I believe, and I think other board members believe that regardless of which school the kids will go to, they will have an equitable, excellent educational experience. That is what we can provide. The grandfathering piece allows families who may be affected by this change to decide what is best for their family and their student in that situation, given the realities that we have of this redistricting, right? I don't know what's best for every student affected by these changes, whether it's to stay or to move, but we're giving them the flexibility to stay where they are, and the family can decide if that's something they're able to make happen, how much that's important to that student, because that'll vary from family to family and student to student. But I really appreciate the administration's proposal that grandfathering is generous, because it gives families flexibilities, at least in that way, that if they are being affected by this redistricting, they are being asked to move, that they can choose what's best for them. And I do believe that at each of those schools, students can have an excellent experience, an equitable experience, and that's what we can provide. I don't have any other questions, like I said. Oh, I'm sorry, I do. This is my last question, though. As we talked about making the high school numbers balanced, I know on our chart that we showed before that a number of emails that we've gotten and have read, or people have said, the high schools, Nequa still has room. Nequa looks like, if you look at the future capacity, that it's at 80%, 74%, while the other high schools are at 98% or 93%. Can you explain or share with us if this total for Nequa is reflective of with the freshman building or without the freshman building, and if so, how that would affect the capacity?
Sure. The capacity that's been used and shown throughout this process does include the freshman center. So the main campus of Nequa would be a similar capacity to our other two single high school buildings, and then that Burkett Center actually is built in the standard model as our middle schools. As Dr. Talley mentioned, it was originally designed to be a middle school, so it would function very similar to a middle school building as far as capacity. So it has a capacity of about 1,000. I'll just point out the three high schools. We covered this a little bit on the 20th. We've used that 2,700 number and we've labeled it as sort of a maximum. Administration really feels at the high school level that's a good number for all three of our buildings to function at. So we've looked at it as more of a target number as opposed to a capacity. Both Nequa and Waubonsie have functioned with significantly more students than that, into the 3,000 plus range at just main campuses in the past. So we're comfortable that the recommendation we have allows for us to even out that enrollment and that all three buildings are in a position to serve those students. From a square footage standpoint, Waubonsie is actually our largest of the three buildings, which I think has surprises some people. Waubonsie actually has over 100,000 more square feet than the other two campuses. So, we're again, when we look at Mateo right now, which is functioning with about 3,000 students, that's actually our smallest of our three high school footprints. So, we're feeling pretty good that all three of those main campuses can handle the 2,700 target we're recommending.
And then that 2,700 target recommendation has each of the schools functioning at about 97%. So the 70% we've been seeing for Nequa
Includes the freshman center, right?
So if we remove that, that's what
Correct.
I just wanted to clarify.
Correct. If we remove that, then Nequa would be, we'd present similar to the other two high schools, a 2,700 number.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rising.
I guess first, thank you. Thank you for looking at Young again. That was a big concern for me last time. I know it was mentioned on the 20th that higher capacities at the elementary is a lot harder to accommodate, more so than it is at the middle or high schools. So I was very thankful that you looked at that, as well as Granger Hill, the FRL at Gombert. Thank you for looking at the split feeders. It was a concern of mine when I saw numbers under 20%. And now we have well above that. Can you turn down my mic a little? Thanks. I can't get farther away. So I appreciate all of those things. You know, I just wanted to make a couple comments. Is the reason why we did this. Boundaries are never easy. It's not something that a board wants to do, or a superintendent or administration for that matter. The pandemic and the overcrowding in the north really kind of forced us to look at this time frame right now. We also have to remember that in the Engage 204 session, which there were over 500 parents involved in that back in 2018, two of their things that they recommended that the board looked at were the boundaries and the class sizes. And if we did not look at the boundaries and spreading out our students, we could never look at the class sizes, which is the ultimate goal of what we want to do as a board and as a district. This process was clearly outlined in May. You know, for everybody that has seen the diagram and has showed us the diagram of the stakeholders involved, it was the school board, the administration, RSP, the boundary committee, and the community. 5 spokes in a wheel, all very important in this process. The boundary committee looked at, evaluated multiple concepts, followed the guiding principles by the board, and had their own guiding principles. RSP facilitated it. RSP looked at community input, and community input was taken, tens of thousands of community input comments, of which board members all read. And there was always administrative input and recommendations that were part of that. That was always part of the process and the decision-making and the 5 spokes in the wheel, because board members are not educators. Well, some are teachers, but I mean, we don't run a school district. That's the administration and the superintendent's job. They are in charge of the operations, the staffing, capacity, what's the best possible student equitable experience. That is all input that the board looks to the superintendent and administration for. We do not manage that day to day. We are the oversight of the district. And then there was always the board input. And we said from the beginning that the board could accept, reject, combine, add comments, suggestions. That was always part of this process. And the board was, as Mr. Karubas alluded to, the board was very involved in this process from the very beginning. All of the board members were showing up at the boundary committee meetings, listening, watching, at the open houses. Many of us talked to dozens of community members. And at a certain point, we had to move forward based on what the boundary gave us, and then recommendations of the administration. That was clearly identified that on the 20th, an administration recommendation would be presented of a proposal of the concepts. There was never assurances that, you know, one of the concepts that came out of the committee would be written in stone, that was the proposal that would be given to the board. That was never promised. When you look at the boundary criteria, I feel we met most of these. Now, did we meet them exactly and all of them for every single area across the district? No. But as Dr. Talley had mentioned, you could not meet all these criteria for every single area throughout the district. But we met a majority of these. There is no perfect solution. I was around and attended all of the boundary committee meetings before I was a member, back from 2005 to 2008. This process was significantly better than the process back then. There was input, there was feedback, there was collaboration, and there was a clearly identified process. And I asked a couple of the board members who were on that board back then, and they say you have to go with what the best proposal is that you're presented with. It's not going to be perfect. Not everyone is going to go to the closest school. But I can guarantee you, having been in this district for 27 years myself, this is about the best solution that we've had in the last 12 years of where people are attending schools. This is the best feeder system I've seen, and thank you, by the way, for taking those feeders from, down to 6. Only 6 of our elementaries of 21 have a split feeder, and only 2 of our 7 middle schools. There will never be a clean feeder system in our district until our enrollment lowers and we can start closing schools, and that's the reality of it. Until our population goes down, we won't be able to have clean feeders. It is especially hard in the middle part of the district. The enrollment, the building utilization, I'm extremely excited about, as other people have mentioned. The number of students from 5,000 down to now about 2,500 or so. And the transportation numbers, I'm happy with of what we're seeing, of what's presented to us. That's not talking about the grandfathering. There is no easy way to look at our district. The schools were built at such a fast rate. You cannot look at this district north to south or west to east. It is very unique of where the school placements are, and especially where the high schools are. I did want to make mention that for people to assume that this wasn't a transparent process, I highly reject that. This board is nothing but transparent, and for people to assume that we are not is offensive. We run to represent all the students in this district. We don't get paid for this position. We do it because we love our community, and we want to represent all the kids.
Why introduce the change at the last minute then? Why not do it throughout the process?
We are not doing the boundary process for other than to help all of our students. There is no emotional or political aspirations of any of these board members. This would be a never-ending process if we kept the boundary process open until everyone got what they wanted. One thing I can tell you about boundary changes, my 2 daughters were affected by boundary changes. Their friends got split from them 3 times in 6 years. Here's what I can tell you about my daughters. They maintained those friends. They saw those friends when they went to other schools. When they got to high school, they knew other friends at other high schools. And it was one of the best experiences that they had, knowing kids at other schools. It's disappointing when I hear mentions of cities of our district. We are 204. We are not a certain city. We are District 204. We're the second best K-12 district in the state of Illinois, and one of the top 75 districts in the United States. We should be proud of every school in our district, and I'm proud of this process that the boundary committee went through. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I just have a couple of questions. So, one of the topics that came up quite a bit between the 20th and now, well, even before then, is the Owen walkers. Can you talk about the thoughts there? They're in a very unique position, and we were not able to accommodate them.
Sure, that is the Brighton Ridge and West Glen subdivisions and Mill Ponds apartments in the kind of right off 75th Street and in the far eastern side. And that has been a challenge. I think
Thank you.
that's been a challenge in several boundary processes for our district.
Good job, yes, thank you. I want to see him cast a vote.
Given the location. The challenge, so that is a challenging area. There's no doubt about that. Excuse me. Right now, Owen is currently one of the split feeders for both middle, and then those students also split at high school too. And that's because Owen is one of the schools that has capacity to take on some of those areas in the middle of the district that I think some of the other board members were referencing. So for that area, for the walkers in that area to then attend what would be a geographically closer middle or high school would further feeder that elementary school. We would potentially create an elementary school that was going to 3 different middle schools and 3 different high schools. To maintain the feeder system as clean as possible, again, we don't have a perfect feeder system, but to work to keep that relatively clean, as well as just with the capacity targets at the high school for Neuqua Valley, we made the determination to keep it on its current path, which is goes to Still Middle School and then Waubonsie High School.
So it's
I'm here, thank you.
It's correct that with the removing the freshman center, Neuqua will still have the highest number of students compared to the other 2 high schools, if I remember correctly, looking at the numbers. That's
Correct.
That's an important point for everybody to understand, that even, people are very focused on the 74, 80% that Ms. Fosdick talked about. It's like when you remove that freshman center, Neuqua still will have the most students. So when community is asked to be a little increment to be put into that school, it's like that school is already higher than the other ones.
Under capacity.
So. Also, just to verify, Ashwood Park today is mapped to Waubonsie, like not in the proposal, but where their houses are, they would go to Waubonsie. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is the small area, the Ashwood
Ponds.
Ponds area, which does go to Neuqua currently.
Ashwood Creek.
That would be the only area that goes, that's the only area throughout the system that we are recommending a change that would move students from Neuqua to one of the other 2 high schools.
Only because we are small, right?
All right, so I have a few closing comments which are very consistent with some of the other words that others have shared, but I will read them because I did put them together, and I've been doing a lot of writing lately to lots of community members. So I want to thank the community administration and the board for all of their work on this very challenging process. It is clear that the process or the results will never satisfy everyone. There is no perfect answer, as Mr. Rising shared, that solves all the issues while addressing all the concerns. I recognize some people are deeply disappointed with the plan. They saw concepts they liked, and unfortunately, parts of those concepts were not incorporated in the proposal. I know each of the board members have items that they would like to see change, but each change causes a new set of issues or a portion of our community who objects. This could go on in an infinite loop. Please be assured that we read your emails, your website postings, received your petitions, listened to your public comments, and even were aware of all the comments on social media. we're an active board that looks for input from our community. We heard all of you and understand the issues and your desires. It is just not possible to create a solution that makes everyone happy. We don't have a perfect proposal, but it moves us in the right direction and provides broad grandfathering options. We have all tried our best and put a lot of time and thought into this process. I will repeat what I said at the last meeting. Please be assured that wherever your student ends up, you will be attending a top-rated school with staff who will embrace and support your children. It is time to move forward with decision-making and implementation. So.
Thanks, Matt.
So I need a motion and a second to approve the attendance area adjustments for the 2022-23 school year.
I move that the Board of Education approve the attendance area adjustments for the 22-23 school year as presented.
Second.
Is there any more discussion? Okay, Jeannie, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rising.
Yes.
Mr. Karubis.
Yes.
Ms. Deming.
Aye.
Ms. Grover.
Yes.
Ms. Donahue.
Yes.
Ms. Jane.
Yes.
Ms. Fosdick.
Yes.
The motion passes. Now I need a motion and a second to approve grandfathering students for the boundary adjustments.
I move to approve the grandfathering students for boundary adjustments.
Second.
Any discussion, any more discussion on this point?
I just want to make a clarification, Dr. Talley, that if they choose their current home school, they will get transportation.
Wait,
If they
New-
choose the current new school or whatever
Yes.
school they're
Yeah.
assigned to, they get transportation.
They will get transportation to their new home school, correct?
And if they choose to grandfather, there's no guarantee of transportation.
That is correct.
Okay.
And I just have a request and just a question. I request that you communicate that very closely to, just so they understand that they cannot change, so they
Yeah.
will have to be very understanding in the decision that they make. And then just one other question on transportation that I think you can answer, we don't have to have Matt, is that assuming, other than driver shortage, and I believe I heard Mr. Shipley say this, other than driver shortage, there is nothing else preventing us from trying to accommodate the transportation for those students that we're grandfathering, correct?
Correct. We're very focused on the, it's not necessarily a monetary issue, it's more of a driver issue.
And routing issue.
Yeah, and routing. And just to go back to a question Ms. Fosdick asked, it'll be about 10 to 12 drivers is what we would need for the total number of students, because we don't know how many will actually take it, but that's what we assume, between 10 and 12 drivers would cover those additional routes.
So in a scenario where every student chooses to grandfather, we would need 25% more drivers.
10 or 12.
No.
Yeah.
For the shortage that we have currently,
Yes.
it would increase by 25%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Donahue?
Yes.
I did have just a statement
Go ahead.
regarding transportation. Thank you. I did go through, my family was part of the last major boundary process, and we were impacted, and we had to make decisions regarding transportation for grandfathering. And I would just encourage those families that are impacted, that want to consider grandfathering at this time when we are not able to confirm transportation, please talk with your neighbors and look to see if there are any type of ways that you can work together. We did do that in our family with a few families, and we were able to help make sure that our students did grandfather into the school, grandfather the school that they came from. So please don't hesitate to see if you as a community can work with those neighbors that are also seeking to see if they can help make it happen. So for your families and your students. Thanks.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay. Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Mr. Karubis,
No.
Ms. Fosdick,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
Ms. Grover,
Yes.
Mr. Rising.
Yes.
The motion passes. And lastly, we have approval of the application for the waiver modification of the mandates of School Code, Section 27-24.2, driver's education. I need a motion and a second. Can you please be quiet?
I move that the Board of Education approve the application of the waiver modification of the mandates of School Code Section 27-24.2, driver's education as presented.
I second.
Any discussion?
Do you know what our numbers have been like for driver's ed? I don't know if you know off the top of your head. You can always get those to me. I'm just wondering if they've been staying steady.
I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
know we went through a lot of trying to make it work throughout the pandemic so that,
Yeah.
adjust it. I know how many, like last year, we had 561 that paid. And I'll have to look at those numbers for our ones that were the free and reduced lunch that were on top of that as
Yeah, I
well.
mean, I know a lot of high school families where the kids are involved in so much, they can't take it with school, and then they're going and getting it on the outside, and the costs there average between $500 and $900.
I had
So,
to do
yeah.
that with my son, had to go to outside. Also, where his birthday landed, it would have been like 6 months later, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and he had sports, and so.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Jeannie, will you call the roll?
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Ms. Fosdick,
Yes.
Ms. Grover,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue.
Yes. The motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next items are legislative advocacy and Board of Education update. Does anyone have any items? I have a couple things to share, but. no. Okay. We did, right before the holidays, have a meeting with IASB to talk about large unit voices in the organization and also to discuss things that have been happening with that organization and the national group. The outcome of the meeting was that they are going to have a month or a quarterly meeting with the large unit districts. And they also have formed a new committee to take a look at the resolutions committee and also leadership in the organization. And we will be represented on that committee by Christian Fitzgerald from 203. I think that they were very sensitive to our concerns in that our districts carry such a high volume of the students in the state and felt like we were not adequately represented or our voices heard in some of these decisions and activities that were being done by IASB. So I think it was a big success, and I'm looking forward to more discussions with them. And I think that they clearly got the message from all of the large unit districts in the area were represented there. So I don't know if anyone has any questions on that.
I just think it's extremely encouraging because with having the second most school districts of a state in the country next to California, unit districts and large unit districts should have more of an impact at a state level. So I'm encouraged by it.
And the other thing I'll mention is Ms. Grover brought up also that IASB put out a newsletter recently, and it triggered me to send out the email for us to have a board evaluation, and so we'll work on scheduling that. But Ms. Grover also pointed out that they are looking for, by April, I guess, submissions for any ideas for presentations for the next conference, which we were very grateful to have one this time by the gentleman on the board, and our lawyer and others, Mr. Shipley, to take a hard look and think about topics that we might want to propose as a presentation at the next conference. So I think that's it that I have. So any other items? No? If not, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, second.
Aye.
See you, Susan.
Night, everybody.